Hare Rama, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Today we'll hear from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 5, Text 46. Anena te deva kata sudhaya. Anena te deva kata sudhaya. Vritha Vya Vishadashaya Ye Pravriddha Bhaktya Vishadashaya Ye Vairagyasaram Pratilabhya Bodham Vairagyasaram Pratilabhya Bodham Yatajasan Viyu Akunta Drishyam Yatanjasan Viyu Akunta Drishyam Anena te deva kata sudhaya Pravriddha bhaktya vishadashayaye Vairagyasaram pratilabhya bodham Yatanjasan viyurakunta dishyam Anena te deva kata sudhaya Pravriddha bhaktya vishadashayaye Vairagyasaram pratilabhya bodham Yatanjasan viyurakunta dishyam Others, please.
Anena te deva kata sudhaya. Pravidya bhaktya vishudasya dasayaye. Vairagyasaram patilabhya bodham. Yatanjasan viyor akunta dishyam.
Anena te deva kata sudhaya. Pravriddha bhaktya vishadasaya ye. Vairagyasaram pratilabhya bodham. Yatanjasan viyurakunta dishyam.
Anena te deva kata sudhaya.
Anena te deva kata sudhaya.
Pravriddha bhaktya vishadashayaye.
Pravidya bhaktya vishadasya ye.
Vairagyasaram pratilabhya bodham.
Varajasaram Pratilabhyam Yajnam Yasnam Yogamushadishyam
Anema te deva katasudhyaya
Anena Deva Katasudaya
Pavritya Valaktyaya Vispasaya ye
Pravidya Vishadasaya
Vayakara Saram Prabhutapaya Padam
Varajasaram Pratilabhyam
Yata Yadastatur Aliyalakta Vidistayam
Yajnam
Anena te deva katasudaya.
Anena Deva Katasudaya
Lavita bhaktya vishakashaya ye. Vairagya saram patita prabodham. Yadam jasad vishu akrita dishniyam.
Synonyms. Anena, by drinking. Te, of you. Deva, O Lord. Katha, topics. Sudhaya, of the nectar. Pravrta, highly enlightened. Bhaktya, by devotional service. Vishada ashaya, with a greatly serious attitude. Yea, those who Vairagyasaram, the entire purport of renunciation. Pratilabhya, achieving. Bodham, intelligence. Yatha, as much as. Anjasa, quickly. Anviyu, achieve. Akuntatishnam, Vaikuntaloka in the spiritual sky. Translation. O Lord, persons who, because of their serious attitude, attain the stage of enlightened devotional service, achieve the complete meaning of renunciation and knowledge, and attain the Vaikuntaloka in the spiritual sky simply by drinking the nectar of your topics. Responsibly, please. O Lord, persons who, because of their serious attitude, attain the stage of enlightened devotional service, achieve the complete meaning of renunciation and knowledge, and attain the Vaikuntaloka in the spiritual sky, simply by drinking the nectar of your topics. Srila Prabhupada's purport. I know. It's going to be a really long class, so just buckle up. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The difference between the impersonalist mental speculators and the pure devotees of the Lord is that the former pass through a miserable understanding of the absolute truth at every stage, whereas the devotees enter into the kingdom of all pleasures, even from the beginning of their attempt. The devotee has only to hear about devotional activities, which are as simple as anything in ordinary life, and he also acts very simply. whereas the mental speculator has to pass through a jugglery of words, which are partially facts and partially a make-show for the maintenance of an artificial and personal status. That's strong language for the Mayavadis here. How unusual is that? Not at all. I mean, we're still making our way through that one purport in the 5th chapter of Chaitanya Charitamrita's Adi Leela. We may finish this year. At least we'll try. At least we'll have died trying if we don't succeed. And then you get to chapter 7. Some of Prabhupada's purports in chapter 7. Mayavadis are doomed. In spite of his strenuous efforts to attain perfect knowledge, the impersonalist attains merging into the impersonal oneness of the Brahmajyoti of the Lord, which is also attained by the enemies of the Lord simply because of their being killed by him. The devotees, however, attain to the highest stage of knowledge and renunciation and achieve the Vaikuntha Lokas, the planets of the spiritual sky. The impersonalist attains only the sky and does not achieve any tangible transcendental bliss, whereas the devotee attains the planets where real spiritual life prevails. With a serious attitude, the devotee throws away all achievements like so much dust, and he accepts only devotional service, the transcendental culmination. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurum Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Mukhaṁ Karoti Vachalam Pangum Labghayate Girim Yatkripatamaham Bande Shri Guru Tatam Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Pancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Yevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Anena Te Deva Kata Sutaya Pravritta Bhaktya Vishadashaya Deva Ayadagya Saram Patilavcha Bodham Yatanja Sambiyo Rakuntadishna. O Lord, persons who because of their serious attitude attain the stage of enlightened devotional service achieve the complete meaning of renunciation of knowledge and attain the Vaikuntha in the spiritual sky simply by drinking the nectar of your topics. Interesting phrase here, Vairagya Sadhana. Vairagya means, Prabhupada translates it often as here, as renunciation. More precisely, Vairagya is detachment. Renunciation means you don't like it. Detachment means you don't give a darn. Come or go. Don't live, don't die, right? That's detachment. So, what is the essence of detachment? What is the real understanding of detachment? It means you don't have anything to do with the material world, nor do you have anything to do with aversion to the material world, which is what moksha is all about. It's all about kind of getting free from the material world. It's like becoming debt-free. It's a cool thing. It's great. I know that when we moved to Alaja, there were a couple of families who, one very shortly after we got there, and another one a little bit later, became debt-free. It was like it was a huge thing. They didn't have car payments. They didn't have student loan payments to worry about. They didn't have mortgage to worry about. They didn't have credit card balances to worry about. Boom. It's great. It's like, so that's what liberation's like. That's what attaining nirvana is like. You get to zero. And compared to being deeply in debt, that's an amazing thing. Seems really cool. Blissful, you might say, right? But when you've got a positive bank balance, when you've got all kinds of money, when you've got credit coming out your ears that you can use without having to worry about it, that's even better. Having, this positive balance, that's something even better. So here, Krishna is saying something that should be a little familiar to most of us, that, the trouble you take to attain liberation is pretty much what you get for it. We'll see how Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita, and he says, and then the demigods say the same thing early in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam. That all the trouble you take to attain liberation is pretty much what you get. That's your big reward. Because really, it's nothing. And it's not a natural situation for the jiva, because among the jiva's characteristics, I think Paramatma Sandarbha lists 20 odd, 23, 26, something like that, different characteristics of the jiva that are discussed there. One of them is will, agency, conation. We determine to do things and we do it. But in that state, that sense of having merged with Brahman, having become the whole Brahman, there's nothing to do. There's no sense of myself. There's no me and Alexander. There's no Jayagopal and Daniel. No Nagapatni and Idiot. It's just, I'm you and you are me and we are one and we're all together, cuckoo cuckoo, and there's not much cuckoo cuckoo. There's not much to do. So, you want to sing the rest of it?
No, you just
You want to do the instrumental? So, that's really the deal. So, what we're confronted with in verses like this, and there's so many of them in the Bhagavatam, plenty of them in the Bhagavad Gita as well. What we're confronted with is a question of whether it's better to love to exist or to exist to love. Because existence is kind of like the bottom line, that's the base, sat. We are. And that's a really big thing. You can say, I'm a man, she's a woman, that's a telephone, this is a harmonium. But there's one thing in common, and that is the I am part, that existence. But there are also other things that the jiva possesses that are inherent in the jiva that you can't get away from. And ignoring those, what leaves us in an unsatisfying condition. What does Prabhupada call it here? Miserable understanding of the absolute truth at every stage. You got to sit in the forest, meditate. You got to do all these word games, with the Swami, and trying to crack your intelligence or something like Zen koans or something, meant to kind of like break your attachment to reason. What's the bumper sticker they have? Meditation, it's not what you think. Or maybe it's not what you think. So, that's the impersonalist's whole thing, that loving to exist. But there's not even any real love there. You just kind of exist because you've sort of effaced, that willing part of yourself. Not to speak of real ananda, real juice. The ananda, we've been discussing this in our weekly Nectar of Devotion class, and we're going to get a little bit to that. This is one of those those days when you really need to pull the batteries out of the clock. I had no clue, out of all the stuff that I could read or discuss, I had no clue at the moment exactly where I'm going to. I have a couple of ideas that I don't, things that I don't want to miss, but this is a really big part of Lord Chaitanya's teachings, is this thing that everybody's striving for. It's negligent as far as the benefits we get from it really are. So, you go through all this trouble, and then, what do you get for it? No trouble from the material energy, you don't get, but you also don't get any juice from the spiritual energy. You don't even have, in that situation, appreciation for the Lord's lotus feet, or more specifically, as we see in this verse, topics of the Lord's lotus feet. You don't have any appreciation for that. So that leaves us open to simply a miserable condition of life. So Krishna says what's going to come first? Okay, Bhagavad Gita. Oops. Okay, that was wrong. So at the beginning of the 12th chapter, in text 5 of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells us, this is as plain as you can get. Klesho dikatarastesham avyakta sakta chetasam avyakta higatir dhukam deva vadbhir bhavite. For those whose minds are too much attached to the unmanifested impersonal feature of the Supreme, advancement is very troublesome. To make progress in that discipline, that's progrese. Got a typo in the Bhagavad Gita here. To make progress in that discipline is always very difficult for those who are embodied. So this is a tough thing for people who actually live in material bodies. Bhakti, not so much, because there's a whole stage of embodied bhakti, sadhana bhakti. It's about using your senses to satisfy the Supreme senses. So Krishna tells us straight out here, the chapter is called Devotional Service, so he ends up spending the bulk of the chapter glorifying bhakti. Still thinking about something I heard some years ago about some devotees in Eastern Europe teaching that Bhagavad Gita is not a bhakti text because their guru had said so, or something like that. And this kind of became a theme of this series of Bhagavad Gita classes that I was giving in North Carolina at the time. Okay, I'm trying to figure out where it's not a bhakti text, starting from the first verse. So Srila Prabhupada writes, and I'll read a little bit of Srila Prabhupada's purport, just so you get a flavor. The group of transcendentalists who follow the path of the inconceivable, unmanifested, impersonal feature of the Supreme Lord are called Jnana Yogis, and persons who are in full Krishna consciousness engaged in devotional service to the Lord are called, it's parallel, Bhakti Yogis. Now, here is the difference between Jnana Yoga and, the difference between Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga is definitely expressed. The process of Jnana Yoga, although ultimately bringing one to the same goal, in a manner of speaking, the process of being in direct service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is easier and natural for the embodied soul. The individual soul is embodied since time immemorial. How long has our karma been going on? Anadi, since time immemorial, since before time, since beyond time, since outside time. Anadi karma pale. I'll give you a talk for sins. Kori pravar navajali. I have been caught up in this net of material existence for innumerable births. Anadi, since beginningless time. It's very difficult for him to simply theoretically understand that he's not the body. Therefore, the Bhakti Yoga accepts the deity of Krishna as worshipable because there is some bodily conception fixed in the mind, which can thus be applied. I think on one or two occasions, Srila Prabhupada said something like, in the form of the deity, Krishna comes in a form we can handle, which is a nice way of putting it. And there are some of us who become fortunate enough to actually be able to handle the deity. And then he goes on. And then we have in the second chapter of the 10th canto, prayers by the Devatas to Lord Krishna in Devaki's womb. In text 32, I think I might have mentioned this recently. I have mentioned it recently in one of the classes I've given. This is my 5th class this week, so I get a little lost sometimes. The demigods are praying to the Lord. Ye nyeda vindaksha vimuktamaninas tvayasta bhavada avishuddha bhutaya. Really contaminated intelligence. This whole business of aspiring for this impersonal liberation is a result of a really murky intelligence. Aruhya pratrena parampadam tata patantyata adata yushmaram graya. Oh, lotus-eyed Lord, there's a square brackets kind of aside here in the verse. Someone may say that aside from the devotees who always seek shelter at the Lord's lotus feet, there are those who are not devotees, but who have accepted different processes for attaining salvation. What happens to them? In answer to this question, what Brahma and the other demigods said, O lotus-eyed Lord, although non-devotees who accept severe austerities and penances to achieve the highest position may think themselves liberated, their intelligence is impure. They fall down from their position of imagined superiority because they have no regard for your lotus feet. So we've been discussing what this means. This is a very difficult thing to understand, what it means to fall down from impersonal liberation, because in a sense, there's nowhere to fall. There's no one to fall, because I don't have a distinct sense of myself anyway. But it's even that, especially compared to the pleasure of bhakti. Oh, we'll get there. Even that, especially when compared with the pleasure attained from Shuddha Bhakti, or as Goswami expresses it in the 11th verse of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Uttama Bhakti, pure devotional service. By pure devotional service, we don't necessarily mean being an Uttama Bhakta, being Mahabhagavat. But as it's defined right there at the beginning of that first chapter, which is about bhakti in a general sense, it means bhakti that's not contaminated by other aspirations. Doesn't mean there aren't other desires that crop up here and there because of deep samskaras dug over many lifetimes. Here it comes.
Jai Shri Pancha Ki.
Where was I?
Impersonalist falling down.
The intimates.
Oh, yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean being a Mahabhagavat, but it means devotional service that's not contaminated by other like life goals, other aspirations. There might be desires that come up because of some scars that have been kind of dug into in our hearts over many lifetimes. But our goal becomes simply to use our senses to give pleasure to Krishna's senses. So the pleasure from that is compared to an ocean and the whole material world, including liberation, sometimes compared to a calf's hoof print by comparison. So Srila Prabhupada writes, I'll read a little bit of his purport because I also want to go to the Nectar of Devotion and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Aside from devotees, there are many others, non-devotees known as karmis, gyanis, or yogis, philanthropists, altruists, politicians, impersonalists, and voidists. There are many varieties of non-devotees who have their respective ways of liberation, but simply because they do not know the shelter of the Lord's lotus feet, although they falsely think that they have been liberated and elevated to the highest position, they fall down. As clearly stated by the Lord himself in the Bhagavad Gita, Ashvatthana Purusha, Dharmasyasya Parantapa, Aprahyamam Nivartante, Mrityu Samsaravartani. Those who are not faithful on the path of devotional service cannot attain me, O conqueror of foes, but return to birth and death in the material world. It doesn't matter whether one is a karmi, gyani, yogi, philanthropist, politician, or whatever. If one has no love for the lotus feet of the Lord, one falls down. That is the verdict given by Lord Brahma in this verse. There are persons who advocate accepting any process and who say that whatever process one accepts would lead to the same goal. Old timers, you know the Yatamat Tatapa, right? That's the famous Mayavadi thing that we used to like to kind of like spit on. Yatamat Tatapa. Whatever path, same goal, right? Or something like that. All paths lead to the same goal. But that's, but that is refuted in this verse, where such persons are referred to as vimukta manina, signifying that although they have attained the highest perfection, although they think they have attained the highest perfection, in fact, they have not. So they're liberated in their own minds, right? Just like we have this way of putting people down. Oh yeah, he's a legend in his own mind, So these people are liberated in their own minds. And whatever pleasure they're able to attain from that is actually made to look very lightweight compared to the pleasure gained from bhakti. So we see at the beginning of the second chapter, no, we're still in the first chapter of the Nectar of Devotion, still in the first chapter of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, certainly. We see that pure devotional service can be characterized by how many things, Irina? How many characteristics?
6.
Bingo. A student. It has 6 particular characteristics that you can point out. Kleshani, Shubhada. These two appear, they become prominent in the stage of sadhana bhakti, especially once you get well into the stage of anartha nivriti. So that's having made a little progress, particularly at ruchi and asakti. Ruchi means having a taste for serving the Lord, and asakti means being attached actually to the Lord himself. So those 2 things, kleshani, relief from material distress, and shubhada, bestowal of auspiciousness. So that's one kind of happiness. That appears in the stage of sadhana bhakti, especially a little later on. And then there are 2 more characteristics that become prominent, particularly prominent in the stage of bhava bhakti, which is, well, to the sadhaka, that would be sadhya bhakti, attained bhakti, accomplished bhakti, because bhava is the goal of sadhana. And so those are Sudurlabha and Moksha Lagutagrit. So Sudurlabha means it's very rarely attained. Srila Prabhupada makes a point about that. He says the purport to this verse, there's a verse from the 5th canto about this, and Prabhupada says the purport to this verse is that the Lord may very easily offer liberation, but he rarely agrees to offer a soul devotional service, because by devotional service to the Lord, by devotional service the Lord himself becomes purchased by the devotee. We've talked about this. Advaita Acharya is one example. He thought, it's time. He's got to come. So he had a couple of approaches, carrot and stick, right? Lots of hunkari, lots of bellowing prayers to the Lord. Now's the time to come. And this time, do it yourself. Don't send any avatar even, just come and do it. And the stick part, the carrot part is, he's worshiping his Narasingha Shila with simple Ganges water and Tulsi manjaris, soft Tulsi manjaris, offered with love, the essential ingredient. So, and why? What's behind that? What's his motivation? What's he thinking? Well, there's a verse in the scripture that says, if someone lovingly offers me, makes a simple offering of Ganges water and Tulsi manjaris, I become purchased by that devotee. I become his property. And if you're somebody's property, you pretty much do what they say, right? Unless you're a cat. Well, the cat admits to being no one's property, of course. Perfect, right. In the Nectar of Devotion, Srila Prabhupada discusses this, and it's a little more lengthy. No, it's a couple of paragraphs. I think we can do it before people start walking out on me. So this is, he says, the happiness of becoming one with the Supreme. Moksha Lukutaka. This means it minimizes or denigrates the pleasure of even of liberation, which is millions of times greater than any material pleasure, any pleasure attained by rubbing the senses up against their objects. This sense gratification is sometimes referred to as sparshaja, born of the senses, right? And there's at least one place where Srila Prabhupada translates sparshaja, interestingly, as soft skin. Because, you feel that the contact with the soft skin, well, I think we can say innocently of a child, what could possibly be more pleasant than to feel that soft? But the contact, especially, like with a romantic partner, there's, when there's that skin contact, that's a huge thing. So in one place, Prabhupada he translates sparshaja as soft skin. This is kind of like the mother of all sensual enjoyment. So Srila Rupa Goswami says that if Brahmananda, or the happiness of becoming one with the Supreme, is multiplied 1 trillion-fold, it still cannot compare to an atomic fraction of the happiness derived from the ocean of devotional service. Anyway, the number is quite astounding. Trillion-fold might be even minimizing it. In the Hari Bhakti Sudhodaya, Prahlad Maharaj, while satisfying Lord Nrsimhadev by his prayers, says, "My Lord, dear Lord of the universe, I'm feeling transcendental pleasure in your presence and have become merged in the ocean of happiness. I now consider the happiness of Brahmananda to be no more than the water in the impression left by a cow's hoof in the earth compared to this ocean of bliss." Similarly, it is confirmed in the Bhavarta Deepika, Sridhar Swami's commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam. "My dear Lord, some of the fortunate persons who are swimming in the ocean of your nectar of devotion and who are relishing the nectar of the narration of your pastimes, the nectar of the narrations of your lotus feet," right? Certainly no ecstasies that immediately minimize the value of happiness derived from religiousness, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation. Such a transcendental devotee regards any kind of happiness other than devotional service as no better than straw in the street. And we know straw in the street, completely negligible. Don't even notice it, right? We don't notice it. We don't even bother to kick it aside. We don't even see it. So moksha laghuta krita. It makes, by comparison, it makes even the happiness of liberation look lightweight. Completely denigrates it. Just blows it out of the water. So that's the big point that's being made here in today's verse, which once again was, "O Lord, persons who because of their serious attitude attain the stage of enlightened devotional service, achieve the complete meaning of renunciation and knowledge, and attain the Vaikuntha Loka in the spiritual sky simply by drinking the nectar of your topics." So we see this also, one more thing real quickly, we see this also in Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's prayers to Lord Chaitanya. Apparently he composed 100 prayers to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We only have 2 of them extant. But one of them is Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga Siksharta Meka Purusha Purana. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Sharira Dhari Kripam Udhigastamaham Prabhati. It says that the devotees are an ocean of mercy because they give the teachings of Lord Chaitanya which bring real knowledge and detachment from this material world. So this is the real thing. Bhakti, Vairagya and Jnana are angas of Jnana Yoga, but they're not angas of Bhakti Yoga. They're side effects. Side effects, because the devotees don't get excited about them. They're there, they follow, Krishna Karnamrita says, can't remember the verse at the moment, but that liberation stands with folded hands like a maidservant behind the devotee, behind the bhakta. So, not a big thing. One of the many maidservants standing back there waiting to offer some service. Okay, let's stop here. Any quick questions or comments? Once, twice, okay.
Yeah, Hare Krishna.
Before the gavel came down.
So I know that Prabhupada is very hard, impersonalist. But considering that most people are practically, they're materialists, they're practically subhuman animals, two-legged animals. If we see that somebody is just, for whatever reasons, are not attracted to personalism, and they have chosen the path of, say Buddhism, shouldn't we just encourage them for the benefit of their, spiritual elevation? Because I do see there's a lot of positive qualities in it, like word of goodness and controlling your mind and austerity, right? And their liberation may not be as high or as enjoyable as the one of the personalists. But if we see someone's already attracted to it and they're making progress along the path, should we as devotees, just encourage them to continue?
That's a really good question. We were talking about that yesterday as well. I think we might have been talking about it last night. Monday night as well. But yeah, it's certainly superior. That pleasure, that existence, sense of existence, is certainly superior in many ways to materialistic existence. The difficulty is that we do become overwhelmed by that. We become easily attached to that pleasure. And it really, what it takes is the association of a devotee to show us something higher. So if we get stuck there, get stuck in that sense that I am the whole Brahman, that's a distinction between Mayavad, what we call Mayavad, and the Brahmavad understanding. The Brahmavad understanding is like the 4 Kumaras, or Shukadev Goswami, before they had their conversion experiences. You know, and Kumar's conversion experience was affected by the smell of the tulsi leaves from the Lord's lotus feet and the incense that had been offered to the Lord. In Vaikuntha, they had gone to visit Vaikuntha. It's like a sort of one of those kids don't try this at home things. If you really dig your Brahmavad thing, then don't go to Vaikuntha, because all of a sudden you're going to become dissatisfied. You're going to lose your faith in that. Because you're going to think, oh, maybe this is better. And Shukadev's conversion, as such as it was, if that's the right word, was affected by hearing the Bhagavatam, especially the whole Bhakti verse from the third canto. When he heard that, he just thought, okay, this is cool, but that sounds better. So that's how Vyasadeva lured him back home, so that he could hear Srimad Bhagavatam and become the Mahabhagavat that he is. So we don't go around trying to talk Buddhists or meditators or whoever out of their thing any more than we, if they don't have faith in the Lord's lotus feet, if we share something of our hearts and if they don't respond to it, you don't dwell there, you don't hammer them, because it's not going to get, it's not going to get anywhere. They have their faith. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that a person is his faith. A person is composed of his faith. Wherever we rest our faith, that kind of identifies us. I rest my faith in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. My family's been here for almost 400 years, blah, 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 blah. I'm an American. You can't talk me out of that. Or, Jesus said it, I believe it, that settles it. Whatever, that's another bumper sticker. So, yeah, so what are you going to do? You encourage them. Because our business, as I see it as disciples, is to grow faith where we find it, including our own hearts. If we happen to find some faith in our hearts, make sure we cultivate that, take care of it, very good care of it, grow it, nurture it, let it get big and bushy and grow all the way to Krishna's lotus feet, and to plant faith where we don't, including in our own hearts. But of course, we can't plant that faith. We can't create it. It comes from the association of devotees. So unless there's some association, powerful association of a devotee, they're going to be satisfied in that, whatever the understanding is, the Shunyavad of the Buddhists, or the kind of faux Shunyavad or neo-Shunyavad of the Advaitins. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, our business isn't to disturb other people's faith unnecessarily. If we can show them something more and they respond, cool. If not, none of your business. Appreciate what's there and find a company that nurtures your faith, not about me.
I really like the way you made the point that ultimately they will become dissatisfied because it's not their own nature.
Yeah. It all boils down to that loving to exist versus existing to love. And even the kinds of love, even the degrees of love that we've experienced in the material world, we know that that's better than not, right? We know that the love we got from our parents, or our cousins, brothers and sisters, our aunts and uncles, our friends, our boyfriends and girlfriends, husbands, wives, children, grandchildren, that's insanely better than just, not existing even.
To be or not to be is the question.
And
The question there is suicide. That's all.
And there's still an ongoing debate in Buddhism on the nature of the self, but like it's not a settled topic.
It's been ongoing for about 2,500 years. It's a very nuanced topic. That whole business of anatma or anatta, as it is in Pali, is a big question in Buddhism. Some people take it as a given, But the Buddha never actually taught it. What he taught was, first thing is, you're suffering. First noble truth, we suffer. The
Right.
second noble truth, we can get out of suffering.
Right. Who is suffering?
Oh, no, the second noble truth, why are we suffering? The third noble truth, we can get out of suffering. And the fourth noble truth, here's how you can get out of the mud, following the Eightfold Noble Path.
Yeah.
So there isn't any question there of who I am or what I am. It's, well, you're there and you're suffering. So deal with that first. And his whole take toward the other thing was, that can be discussed later once you get out of suffering. So, you know, that whole question of anatta, no self in Buddhism, it's a real tricky thing. And it'll be discussed as long as there are Buddhists, I suspect. Yeah, big one. Anything else?
But you mentioned when Sukadeva Goswami went back to Vyasadeva, how Vyasadeva lured Sukadeva Goswami back. I don't know if I knew that happened at some point.
Well, there's always some point when we hadn't heard about it. I think it's from one of the other Puranas, maybe Brahma-Vaivarta Purana, I can't remember now which Purana. There's a story told that as soon as Shukadeva appeared, what did he do?
He ran off.
He took off.
Yeah.
You know, Krishna coaxed him out by saying, it'll be cool, you won't be affected. And he got out, he looked around and he thought, oh, household, what the? And he took off. Went off to the forest and meditated on his Brahmanness, right? And Vyasadeva was like, oh my son. And what was his response? The trees echoing, and that's it, you know, and it's like crickets, you know, in other words, crickets in response. And so he sent some of his disciples out into the forest, disguised as woodcutters, and he gave them a few Bhagavatam verses to chant. Because he knew that if Shukadeva heard one of those verses, that he would realize that even that Brahmananda paled in comparison to bhakti. And Shukadeva was he was 100%, 108% Atma Rama. He was really self-satisfied, being situated in his identity as Brahman. He didn't identify with being the whole thing. We were talking about that yesterday. That's the distinction that Vishnu Swami made between the Kevala Dvaita and the Shuddha Dvaita that he taught. That yes, we're the same in substance as the absolute truth, but he's the complete whole, and we're parts. We're Amsha. So he is great and we are small. Sunday school song. Just see how deep the impressions are. That's got to be 65 years ago, more than 65 years ago that I probably last sang that song. So when they went out in the forest and one of them chanted this particular verse from the third canto, Shukadeva heard that and just that turned me.
Oh, never heard that.
So he came back, he heard Srimad Bhagavatam from Srila Vyasadeva, and because of that, when Parikshit Maharaj had reached this crisis in his life, sat down at the bank of the Ganges to fast unto death, who shows up? But just the right person, the right guy for the job, Shukadeva Goswami. Parikshit had something on his mind. Oh, she's not here. What is the business of someone who's about to die? In other words, what's the ultimate goal of life? What's our real business as human beings? Or as I asked my minister at the innocent age of 7, what are we supposed to do? We're here, what do we do? And Shukadeva had exactly the answer. Yeah, you got 7 days? Okay, let's talk about it. And so he was able to share, this nectar of the Srimad Bhagavatam with King Parikshit and ultimately with all of us. Okay, I'm going to stop now. I'm going to bring the gavel down. Thank you all so much. Anugrahitosmi, a new Sanskrit word I learned. I'm eternally grateful for your engaging me like this.